Hello, welcome to Steve Knows. We're going to compare PSVR titles with the Oculus Quest counterparts, so we can see the differences and what developers do to enable these games to run on the Quest. I'm hoping to highlight the incredible work that is done for the Quest, not deprecate it. My computer is running on an RTX 2080 and the Quest is running on an 835 Snapdragon. Not a fair fight. I'm going to show you 4 titles in this video. Let's get started. First is Drop Dead Dual Strike. This is a cross-buy game that's available. It's an on-rail zombie shooter, and I did review this game, giving it a pretty decent score. I had so much fun playing it. The Quest version doesn't look that bad here at all. We have casted shadows on Evil Monday's face and reflection on his lapel. There's also smoke effects coming from the machine in the background. If we move over to the Rift version, immediately the light range is a lot higher. We get more texture on the clothing and on the skin. The code on the screen in the background is also a lot more visible. That's a big thing on the Quest, is your sight at distance is reduced. This is a great way to optimize these titles without ruining the graphical fidelity too much near your line of sight. The actual animations though, the movement and the fluidity is undistinguishable between headsets. The shooting here has a flash at the end of the gun. This is the same on both systems, very bright and very large. It actually flashes the lighting in the room when you shoot. But on the Quest version you see less reflections on the metallic casing of the weapon. There are many light sources around you, but it just doesn't shine as much as the PSVR version. Let's compare a cutscene where the game activity isn't actually going on. So immediately you can see the foveated rendering occurring around the edges in the headset. You don't see this as much as you focus on the center whilst you're wearing the HMD, but as we're on a screen here, it's within our vision and we can see it a lot more clearly. You can see more pixelated visuals around the edges. The Quest version also has more of a single asset look to it. Like when I look at what they're wearing, they look like it's one item rather than layers, if I'm making sense. But we see good lighting again, such as shadows are being cast in the right places from my direction of view. The Rift actually has brighter lighting in this situation, which doesn't happen a lot, as you'll see. You can see the stitching on Bob's straps, which isn't distinguishable previously. The distance view is also a lot clearer, which are things that don't really have much impact on your gaming experience, but are obviously noticeable when you're doing things like this and comparing them like we are now. So in this Quest scene we have the foveated rendering again. It's very clear, but I'll reiterate, in the headset this isn't as noticeable. The floor has a very orange texture with green patches, which is the same image just coloured slightly differently, which is a great idea to save rendering a new texture. The big difference here is the texture on the floor. It's gone from an orange mud to a dark damp mud that has depth to it. There are cracks and reflection as it's wet. What's great here in the Quest version is the light source. All of the shadows are the same. Bob, you can see his shadow to the left. The barrels, you can also see slight shading to the left. There's range on the edge of the house compared to the porch. It's a lot brighter. The Quest gameplay compared to the Rift gameplay, it's pretty much identical. The only downgrades we see are visually, and that's to allow the game to run as great as it does. It plays really well. The puddles of water are so clear in the Rift version. I actually kept looking at it because the fluidity of it all is just mind-blowing. The Quest version, you can still see this fluidity of water. It looks great. And it's nice to see that we even have grass assets here. They didn't just go for a plain flat ground, which is a job well done. This scene highlights the darkness of the Rift S. In areas where lighting is dim, such as the grass patches, by the boxes, you can barely see anything there at all. It doesn't bring any value if you can't see it. The weapon though is very detailed. You can see the grains on the wood and parts of the gun that's been oxidized where it's so old. In this Quest version the lighting is a lot brighter now. It's a lot clearer, which does mean that they have to deal with less lighting effects as the scene is set up so there's not so many shadows being cast. There's solid textures on the gun now. There's no grain on the wood, but we still see oxidized sections of the weaponry and the embroidery, which is fantastic. This scene shows off the reflections, as from the light source onto the zombie you can see that the front is dark but it's bright on the back. The Quest delivers the same impact. That light source is now behind and all the shadows are cast and you see the edges of the zombies lit up. Really impressive work from the Quest here, managing 2 guns firing and multiple enemies on screen with lighting, all running on a mobile chipset that came out 2 years ago. Great job. The final scene we're going to be looking at here is when you shoot a zombie you get a splatter of blood coming off them, which highlights some nice gore. This also happens in the Quest version, so this hasn't been affected too much. The core game itself, they've kept very strong. I kept this scene to see if it maintains a large number of zombies on screen at once, or if there were any reductions. On the Rift we see about 8 on screen coming at you at once, and on the Quest here we had about 6 at one time. You'll notice once I kill one, another one will start crawling out of the floor. So this comparison, you can see the ways the developers have held back on a few things and tweaked the visuals to get this chip to run these games with the same feel and gameplay we expect. They've done an amazing job. Let's compare Racket NX. Immediately foveated rendering comes into play, but the lighting on the Racket is truly special, especially since the Racket is also translucent as well, with internal moving parts. On the Rift, ignore the mouse, that's my fault for leaving it on. The Racket in this version looks pretty much the same, just more orange this time round than red. But I couldn't tell you from just looking at the images what system this game belongs to. The colours here really do pop, they're extremely vibrant. The glow on each of the icons as well makes it easy to identify them when you're in a fast-paced game. The game feels really good. I know the dev emailed me before it was out and they were just so happy with their work, and you can see why. It's incredibly smooth and fast-paced. On the Rift version, the colours here of the glow are less in your face, but more refined. I'm not sure which I prefer, because in-game you're not really looking at one spot enough to be fussed about the aliasing on the top left of a health icon. But the actual shading of the colours themselves are pretty much identical. I did notice that the ball in the Rift version is more detailed. It has more design work going on than the Quest version. In the Quest, the distant visuals again are dampened. If you look at the sun in the distance through the dome, it's darker, it's more tinted in the Quest version. If you look at the Rift version, there's more definition of the molten hot sludge that's going around the planet outside. Overall though, from playing both versions, the gameplay on the Quest itself is spot on. Let's take a look at Star Wars Vader Immortal Episode 1. More issues with darkness on the Rift, as you can see. Anything that's dark is really dark. But the visuals on things that we can see are incredibly buttery and smooth, with reflections in all the right places. So this is the Quest version. Isn't it incredible? This is one of the most incredible games so far to me visually on the Quest. It's so close to the version running on an RTX 2080, but on a mobile chipset from 2 years ago. It does make use of foveated rendering of course, but it's much less prominent than in the other titles that we've seen. And what I like is you can actually see your hands, they're not in complete darkness. Much of the design in this game using solid textures for both versions helped create the same visual impact as the definitive PC version. In this scene, we're scanning the ship to try and find issues to fix it up. In the Rift version, there is more range in the lighting. Colours are not just one solid colour, which they are in the Quest version. If you look at the background, the orange and the red panels in the Rift version are not all the same shade. We have blue from the Doctor Who time warp lighting that's coming from the front of the ship, as well as the lights that are on the floor. In the Quest version, it's a lot more just solid colour. Here, when the ships come flying over you and you're shooting, you get a glow of lasers appearing in the windscreen. It flashes green as they fire. In the Quest version, you don't get that. They just shoot and fly over, so it feels like they're a lot more distant. We've just landed the ship and now we're being taken captive. There's lots of dark areas where there's no definition, but we can see the red lighting that's coming from the right, with the cheeks being more exposed because as light increases, the colours get saturated, so we're not seeing as much red here. Great work. I really like the textures on his outfit here, the leather and the fabric of his jacket. The retraction of light on these different materials can be seen. Here on the metal arm, as it's matte, are a lot softer in the reflections and the leather, and the jacket just absorbs all the light, so it's an even tone except in the creases. The best bit about this is his eye. It's glowing! In the Quest version, the lighting overall is lifted. We can see a lot more of the troops, but we still get that different effect of lighting on the different materials, but the eye is no longer glowing. We lose that. I can't even with this scene, it's so dark on the Rift, you can't even make out the actual visual fidelity. But the fluidity of the cape as Vader walks in is very nice. It's like a draped curtain in the wind. This version to me is actually better. You can see Vader coming in, but of course with it being brighter, you don't get much of the eerie ethos. The cape on the Quest also looks really good, very fluid. It's not like a Lego cape. And you really feel the presence of Vader. It's not like there's an empty shell in front of you. You feel his presence. Now Vader is closer, you can see the darkness of the helmet is a lot better. The colours are nicer. We have more reflections. Not that we didn't have reflections on the Quest, because we did. There's just more recurring in this one. It's all over the chest plate, just not in the centre of it. The gameplay has not been sacrificed in any way either. What an experience this game is on both systems. Coming from someone who's played on both systems, you don't miss out on anything by playing this on the Quest, or get anything extra by playing it on the Rift. There are slight visual improvements, but you're not comparing side by side at the time of playing to be able to tell the difference anyway. As you walk into the lightsaber room and look up, you can see definition of the building, the architectural outlines. In the Quest version, this is blurred out, it's just bright lights coming down on you. The flooring also has the same design on both systems, it's just more of a flat, matte image with less reflections on the Quest. The Rift version will have a lot more reflection. The saber glow on the Rift and the Quest are very similar to each other as well. I feel like the big difference in this game overall is the lighting. The textures are the same, but they just don't have the dynamic range in colour and lighting to make them really pop. If you look at the robot and its movements and the design, it's the same, it's just the lighting and the shading differs. This is an amazing Quest title and it looks stunning in the headset. VR videos don't do justice watching on a flat screen, as you VR gamers will know. The final one, a game that was made especially for the Quest as well, is First Contact. You're in a room with a Wall-E-like robot, it's very defined all around, foveated rendering is used at a minimum, so the entire image is very clear. Distant visuals are also clear, you can see the basket and its contents at the end of the caravan. A pretty big difference in this one for a game that is advertised as created for the Quest on the store. Foveated rendering is very clear in this one, you can see the jagged edges, but we can actually see through the entire room, so the distant rendering is pretty good. The butterfly is actually translucent in this version, you can see through it, but in the Quest version it's solid. You can't look through the butterfly here. Also in the Rift, the lighting coming through the window is beaming in. You can see the rays of light through the blinds, and this causes reflections on the wooden floor that look incredible. All the mechanics and gameplay felt great on both systems. I couldn't tell them apart on that front. The Quest is a great piece of kit, it amazes me still, the content that we're getting out of it. The sparks on the rockets on both systems are the same, a lot of fast paced sporadic flickers which I wasn't expecting at all. I tested the shooting game to see if the number of targets were affected, but again, the Quest held its own and had just as many targets to process at once. Another difference was the end sequence, the last insert, the lighting on the Rift S was bright and blinding. The Quest, these squares had no glow at all, but it did maintain that rather complex animation still. The actual ending on the Quest didn't have any glowing points of intersection either, it just had wireframes that slowly deprecated. The Rift S had a lot more at the end of this title. That's the showcase of comparisons in this video. Obviously the Quest is running on a limited chipset and the PC VR Rift S is running on an RTX 2080, so that's not a fair comparison in that sense. But this video is to highlight the differences in the games so you can see what developers do to achieve the amazing feats on the Quest system. Thanks for watching. Steve knows. Happy gaming. Good day.